Hey there, it's Tori Tishman. I am a nonprofit strategist and fundraiser with over 20 years of experience in communication, philanthropy, and writing. I come from a philanthropic family and until recently was a ardent supporter of democratic progressive causes. However, having been through a series of opportunities for growth, i.e., experiencing egregious dysfunction in systems as a whistleblower on a lot of different levels, I began to reevaluate how I not only perceive what is a just organization in terms of the need for funding, but also my own role in advancing some of these causes. And so I'm dedicating the rest of my life to speaking the truth about what I've seen in terms of the dysfunction in the nonprofit and progressive space so that we can work towards making things better. Because so many people come to the nonprofit space with the right intentions, right? Like whether you're a donor or you're a volunteer, a lot of folks truly do want to help people. I think that we have more goodness than bad in us, just as human beings, and there's this natural desire to give back. However, in the San Francisco Bay Area, where I'm based, also Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I previously lived, was very, very active with nonprofits my family supported, donated to, volunteered with. In these areas where there's a higher cost of living, essentially, what you can find a lot are these misplaced incentives, meaning you think nonprofit, I think people usually think that someone is not making very much money. You don't think like, oh, this person actually is making more than the President of the United States. No joke. It actually happens. But I want to bring light to it, and I want to give you all the tools so that you can evaluate whether you think a nonprofit is just, whether you think a grant should be funded. I want to give you the tools that I use as a fundraiser to break down how I would apply for a grant, how I would build a relationship, and also how I would analyze what are the incentives with this organization. Because frankly, I've seen a lot of lack of that. I've worked for a number of organizations, and I've worked with private foundations, government grants, donors of all sizes, billionaires, whole range. But what I found is that there's only a very sliver of sophisticated donors, and I mean the 0.01% at best, usually ones with means, that will know what a 990 is, that will know how to actually look at an organization's tax form, their 990, to look at the salaries, to be able to see what the incentives are. Is this person at this nonprofit, are they making a normal wage? Are they making $50,000 a year? Are they making $500,000 a year? Because that's a huge difference in that person's incentives. Because just imagine from that person's perspective, if they're making $50,000 in a role, if they were to leave their job, most likely able to find another job they can make $50,000 on. If they're making $500,000 a year, very, very unlikely in the nonprofit space. So what does that do? Well, it actually sets up a situation where essentially the mission is at a disadvantage and the participants, the people being served, because the person who has the misaligned egregiously high financial compensation, potentially their incentives are to keep their job, at any cost. And we can get into that later, but there's some real dark satanic elements in some of these nonprofits. No joke. I've literally know of a nonprofit where people Satan worship at work, taxpayer funded nonprofit. No joke. Some of the senior leadership. I mean, it's just it's a different world. And so I really want to just help you all. So we're going to start out with just the concept of just like, as a donor, right? If you're looking at a nonprofit, what are your values? what do you want to put forward? Is it, what is your real why in donating? Because for a lot of folks, their real why might be the social capital. It might be, hey, my friends, they give $50 to this organization. I would feel bad if I didn't give $50 because they asked me. I'm not judging that. I'm just saying it's really good to know why you are giving. Or it could be, for example, for me, as someone who is a survivor of violence, I feel very motivated to find organizations that make a difference for that. So for me, the way that I would put a donation, forward with that specific intention would be, gosh, I'm a survivor of violence. Well, what type of violence? Well, I'm a survivor of systems violence, particularly some having to do with illegal immigration, right? Being the victim of crimes. So for me, I would want to give to an organization that supports, for example, ICE or something like that. That's just my own reasoning. That's my own thinking. I'm not saying you can give to whoever you give to. I'm not making a judgment. I'm just saying when you're going through the donation process, really important. Why am I giving? Because if you know why you're giving, then you can know what type of organization am I looking for. Because maybe you don't care. If you're just giving, it's performative. Maybe it's okay that you aren't serving an organization where the incentives are limited. Maybe you don't care that far. But if you're giving because you really care about the mission and you really care about the intention, it's nice to know how the people at the organization are functioning, because that has a lot to do with the efficiency of where those dollars go. So I like to look at, if you Google, you can just Google your nonprofit and 990, it's going to pop up. You're going to see it on ProPublica, Charity Navigator, really easy to look through this tax document. Another way you can do it really easy is if you know the specific role, like you want to look up CEO and X number, X nonprofit and 990, it will pop up. Every nonprofit that is legally allowed to accept donations, and that's the other thing that you might want to look through Charity Navigator. Is this a legal 501c3 nonprofit or another nonprofit, to make sure it's not a scam? They also have an EIN, so you can look through various systems, and we can go through some of those together in future episodes if it's of interest, to ensure that the organization is actually in good standing with their charitable registry, because a lot of organizations aren't. There's a huge scandal in San Francisco about, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago, if you look in the San Francisco Chronicle, about how, these county dollars were going, so many San Francisco County grants, and they give really large scale grants. One of the largest grants that I actually helped procure was a $20 million grant for an organization, was with the city, the county of San Francisco. And there was a huge scandal because they weren't actually looking and ensuring that the nonprofits they were giving to were in good standing. And it turned out there were quite a few that aren't. Well, I do work in the industry, and I can say I, within the last 3 months, talked to someone in a director role at one of the large nonprofits in San Francisco, who assured me this has not changed, that she was working with some of these shady nonprofits, because it's like they don't have enough. And by shady, I mean, there's so much. My grandfather, who I never met, but I was always told by my dad, he used to say, there's so much good in the best of us, and there's so much bad in the worst of us. So much good in the best, so much good in the worst of us, so much bad in the best of us, hardly behooves any of us to talk about the rest of us. I have dyslexia, so sometimes that comes up a little bit. Apologies. But essentially, like, I'm not saying like the nonprofit is like, oh, evil. But what I'm saying is that there aren't enough credible nonprofits that are operating effectively according to the laws that are large enough for them to give these grants out to, which really makes you think, like, take a step back as a taxpayer, like, what the heck are we funding? What are we funding? What are we voting for with those dollars? Because a lot of times, nonprofits, they want to keep going. And this sounds so sick, but there are CEOs of nonprofits in the Bay Area making $500,000, $600,000 solving serving the homeless people, whereas I will talk to people who are experiencing homelessness, have horrible experiences at these nonprofits. Well, I would infer that perhaps, given the compensation levels, they have an incentive to keep these people homeless, to keep themselves getting clients and more contracts, as sick as it is. This is the reality that we need to deconstruct with funding. So email me with any specific, funding questions that you have, Livermore Valley Microgreens at gmail.com. I'm happy to answer them. This is Tori. Have a wonderful rest of your day. God bless.